Banaz was a very calm and quiet person. She just wanted to be happy. When the girl fell in love, the people she considered closest decided that Banaz had dishonored them and should pay for it with her own death. In early December 2005, a young 19-year-old girl went to the police station. She told the officers that they were going to take her life. The people pursuing the girl would stop at nothing. Banaz Mahmod wanted to warn the law enforcement officers that her life was in danger. If something happened to her, they should know who was behind it. Unfortunately, the police were quite skeptical about Banaz's statement. Simply put, they didn't believe her, and that became their biggest mistake. Because sometime later, they had to investigate the disappearance of this young, attractive girl of Iraqi Kurdish origin. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Banaz was born in northern Iraq on December 16, 1985, into a strict family with centuries-old religious customs. Her parents, Mahmod and Banaz Mahmod, had a son and 5 daughters. In 1995, when Banaz was 10 years old, her family moved to the United Kingdom as refugees, escaping Saddam Hussein's policies. But the European country in no way influenced their beliefs. They remained adherents to their religious traditions. Banaz was an ordinary child who grew up in South London, and she had the nickname Naska, meaning softness and tenderness. The girl had long black eyelashes, brown eyes, and cheeks the color of a ripe apple. She was beautiful in the conventional sense. You could gaze at her innocent beauty forever. The men of the Mahmod family adhered to traditional cultural beliefs, considering that their honor and status in society depended on their control over women. Banaz's father was named Mahmud Mahmod. He was the eldest of the brothers living in the South London area. But despite this, the role of head of the family was taken by his younger brother, Ari Aga Mahmod. All power was concentrated in his hands, and the final word was always his, because Ari was a very wealthy man. The eldest sister and the youngest had already been married off by arrangement. Bakal was a little older than Banaz. It was Bakal who first rebelled against the strict family rules. Women were not allowed to wear long nails, pluck their eyebrows, or use perfume. They were severely beaten for any violation. In addition, she refused to marry the man her parents had chosen for her, so she was physically punished again. At 16, the girl couldn't endure such treatment and secretly ran away from home. In the community where Bakal grew up, a daughter's departure from home could bring shame to the entire family. This concerned reputation, how the family was perceived by others. If a woman did not respect the orders established by men, it reflected on them, on the entire surname, on the whole community. And in 2002, the men of the Mahmod family tried to wash away the shame associated with Bakal's departure from home. The girl's brother asked her to meet him under the pretext of handing over things. He lured her to a remote place. When Bakal was walking along the path with a suitcase ahead of her brother, he simply knocked her down, hitting her on the head with something heavy. Then he grabbed her neck with his arm, lifting her off the ground and trying to squeeze her throat. The girl panicked but didn't lose her composure. She bit her brother on the hand and kicked him in the knee with her foot. From the surprise, the teenager loosened his grip and let his sister go. Bakal didn't understand how a person who grew up side by side with her could have just attempted to take her life. She asked her brother about it directly. Instead of an answer, the guy burst into tears. Through tears, he explained that he was very sorry for Bakal, but he was already an adult man and had to finish her off for the sake of his father's honor. In this way, he was supposed to save the family from shame. The father even paid him for it. Bakal didn't press charges and simply went into hiding. After that, the father threatened to deal with her mother and sisters if she didn't return to the family home. But Bakal knew how her return would end. She hid and constantly moved from place to place, never going out on the street without a paranja. The runaway feared that the next attempt to settle scores with her might succeed. The head of the family's inability to control his daughters was seen in the Kurdish community as weakness, and as a result, he faced a certain degree of condemnation. Mahmod tightened control over the household even more and made several attempts to find his runaway daughter. Bekal was nowhere to be found, so it was decided to quickly find a husband for another daughter. In 2003, at the age of 17, Banaz was married off. It was an arranged marriage to a man she had seen only once before. He was 10 years older than her, illiterate, didn't know English, and had literally just stepped off a plane from Iraq. The husband took Banaz to live in the city of Coventry in the east of the English county of West Midlands, but 2 years later, in 2005, the girl left him and returned to the family home in London. In October 2005, Banaz went to the police station to make a statement about how her husband treated her. Since it happened in Coventry, she was interviewed by West Midlands police officers. Scared to death, the girl told the officers her story about how her husband had abused her for 2 years. According to her, he was a man of the old school, living by traditions from 50 years ago. In his understanding, a woman was a thing he could do whatever he pleased with. And from the very first days, he began to raise her according to his own ideas. The man demanded that she satisfy all his intimate needs and fantasies at any time of day or night. He didn't accept refusals from Banaz, deciding that she had no right to a voice. And in case of disobedience, he slapped her or hit her on the back. He threatened to send her to the other world if Banaz complained to anyone about him. The girl was only 17 years old. She didn't understand if such relationships were normal in her culture or here in Europe. The man made her believe that the Mahmod family loved him more than Banaz herself. None of her relatives were nearby. There was no one to protect her. And for 2 years, this man did whatever he wanted with the girl. She didn't even try to defend herself, crying out all her grievances and sorrows in tears, and also pouring it all out on paper in her diary. Banaz tried to take photos of her bruises and scratches, but her husband found out and took everything away. With each day, her life became more and more horrible, turning into an endless series of physical and moral insults. One time, the husband kicked her in the head so hard that he split Banaz's lips, and blood flowed from her ears. Besides that, he twisted her arm, dislocating the joint. That incident didn't pass without consequences. The girl started having memory problems, and blood periodically came from her ears. This was just one moment out of many when violence was used against her. Banaz hid the secret of her marriage from her family and tried in every way to become a good wife to her husband. But in the end, one of her sisters found out about it and told the rest of the family. The sister came to visit Banaz and saw her exhausted look and bruises all over her body. Only then did the girl admit that she wasn't enjoying her life, although she did everything her husband told her. He continued to physically, verbally, and emotionally abuse her. The man convinced his wife that women were good for nothing except being housewives, and Banaz bore the full weight of the fate chosen for her by her parents. When the girl's father learned about her difficulties in marriage, Banaz's husband didn't deny that he sometimes raised his hand to her. He admitted that he punished his wife when she behaved disrespectfully. So the Mahmod family considered it acceptable and instructed their daughter to try even harder to become a better wife for her husband. Over time, the girl left the tyrant several times, going to her parents. But because she was a Muslim, getting a divorce was very difficult for her. Each time, she had to return to her spouse. At home, they convinced her that everything was supposed to be that way. Divorce is a shame, not only for her, but for the entire Mahmod family. Besides the father, all his brothers and other male relatives gathered and forced the girl not to do anything stupid and to obey her husband in everything. After the last incident, Banaz left her spouse forever. The cup of patience overflowed. The girl gathered some of her things and left the house, no longer willing to endure abuse from the person with whom she was essentially supposed to spend her entire life. In Islamic culture, leaving a husband on one's own is forbidden. This is the worst thing a woman can do. In fact, after leaving her spouse, Banaz exposed herself to even greater danger because she met a man named Rahmat Suleimani, a person her family did not approve of. But after an unsuccessful marriage, this guy seemed like a ray of hope to the girl. He treated her with such sincerity and tenderness that her heart gradually began to thaw. Breaking free from heavy relationships, Banaz suddenly gained freedom, able to experience joy and pleasure from communicating with a person of the opposite sex. Initially, there was just friendship between them. They started meeting more and more often, and it grew into a full-fledged relationship. The lovers planned a wedding, a life together, came up with names for their future children. Later, the police recovered dozens of messages between Banaz and Rahmat. They contacted each other every morning and every evening before bed. But of course, they kept all this a secret because they knew the community was watching them closely. Such was the principle of honor. Women's behavior was under strict and constant control. Young people and older men carefully monitored any behavior they considered inappropriate. Women were accustomed from childhood to being under the vigilant attention of male relatives and took it for granted. After Banaz left her husband, she began to constantly notice that she was being followed on the streets. The girl worried that wherever she went, someone was always walking behind her or driving in a car. These were people who knew the Mahmod family, but were not personally acquainted with Banaz. This was the main reason why the girl went to the police station in December 2005. She believed that if something happened to her in the future, they would be to blame. The officers listened attentively to the agitated girl, but did not take any hasty actions, since she was sitting in front of them alive and unharmed. It was possible that Banaz was simply experiencing stress after breaking up with her husband, and it might have just seemed to her that men were now pursuing her everywhere. The police advised Banaz to contact them immediately if something really threatened her safety. They promised to start an investigation and report the results later. Finally, the girl asked if the officers could help her, and she received an affirmative answer with the caveat that everything needed to be checked first. As it turned out, Banaz risked going to the police for a reason. Unfortunately, the detectives did nothing to investigate her statements. They didn't interrogate the husband who subjected the girl to physical and moral abuse. They didn't summon Banaz's parents for a conversation. It took them 3 months just to officially register her statement, after which she was supposed to sign it. This was one of 5 cases when Banaz went to the police about threats she faced. The guardians of the law missed all the signs that the girl was in great danger. Their negligence turned into a tragedy. 2 months after Banaz went to the police, someone from the local community noticed her near a metro station in the company of Rahmat. Spotting the loving couple, the man immediately called the head of the Mahmod family and reported what his daughter was up to. This provoked everything that happened next. That same day, a family council was organized at Ari Mahmod's house, where all the men of their large family were summoned. A fateful decision was made there. The entire event was organized by Banaz's uncle, who had a stronger character than her father. Ari Aga expressed his desire to the younger family members that they defend the honor and get rid of Banaz, who had disgraced the entire clan. The family council resembled a gathering of organized crime leaders more than a relatives' conversation. For some reason, a group of male people decided they had the right to dispose of a young girl's life, to pass sentence on her. The wildest thing in this story is that they believed that in this way they would wash away the shame from the entire family. 2 days after this family meeting, Banaz went to the local police station again and made another statement. The girl overheard a phone conversation between her uncle and her mother. Her uncle Ari Aga said that they were going to take Banaz's life, and a week later, Banaz delivered a letter to the police listing 5 family members who agreed to commit a crime against her. But here, the girl surprised the law enforcement officers with her behavior. She said she didn't want the police to take any measures about it. Apparently, she sincerely believed that her parents wouldn't allow their daughter to be sent to the other world. Or Banaz really thought she had committed an improper act and should be punished for it. In any case, whatever the reason, while in great danger herself, she didn't want to subject her family to trouble. As a result, no further investigation was conducted after the statement. A few weeks after Banaz delivered the letter to the police, her father asked her to come to a relative's house to discuss the divorce issue. The meeting was supposed to take place on New Year's Eve, but the girl was deceived. Mahmod sat his daughter on the couch and forced her to drink a little brandy, obviously hoping to stupefy her. Banaz refused, but she had to do it anyway. The man asked the girl to sit quietly, watch TV, and not turn around. Feeling that something bad was being planned, she involuntarily looked back and saw her own father putting on gloves and taking a rope in his hands. Banaz already knew what would happen next. Apparently, her gaze embarrassed the man, and he left the room for a minute, thereby giving her a chance to escape. The girl rushed to the doors, but they were locked. At first, she just waved her arms in the window, hoping to attract the neighbors' attention, but no one noticed her. Then Banaz smashed the window with her fist and climbed out. She climbed over the fence and, staggering, hobbled barefoot down the road. Blood dripped from the cuts on her hands, and the alcohol she drank buzzed in her head. She was on the verge of losing consciousness. The girl had enough strength to reach the nearest cafe. She went inside and collapsed limply on the floor. The nurses and doctors at the hospital where the injured Banaz was taken said they had never seen anyone so frightened in their lives. The victim asked the staff to contact Rahmat Suleimani. When the young man learned what happened, he rushed to the clinic. Banaz was lying on a hospital gurney. Rahmat recorded the conversation with her on his mobile phone. He asked her to recall everything that happened to her in the smallest details. Besides Rahmat, the victim's story was heard by a police officer who also arrived on the call. Unlike the guy, this policeman didn't believe a single word Banaz said. He decided that the young girl had overdone it with alcohol somewhere and, to avoid trouble, was making up a story on the spot. The patrolman even considered charging Banaz with property damage since she broke the window during her escape. In this case, the police made a huge number of errors caused by misunderstanding and ignorance of what sometimes happened in Muslim families. Later, the officers officially acknowledged this. After several days in the hospital, Banaz was discharged. Rahmat picked her up, but she couldn't stay long with her young man. The Mahmod family persuaded the girl to meet them at a cafe to convince her to return home. Banaz knew that if she ran away, she would die. They would find her anyway and send her to the other world. If she returned home, she would also die because she dared to defy her father. The feeling of absolute doom, which to some extent explained her decision, broke the girl, and she went to her parents' house. One of the last messages sent to Rahmat was about how Banaz loved him. She asked the guy to be careful, knowing she couldn't live a second without him. And the next morning, she disappeared. The Mahmod family claimed that Banaz had disgraced them, brought dishonor by falling in love with an unsuitable man. They disapproved of him only because the girl dared to manage her own life. On January 22, 2006, in broad daylight, 3 men attacked Rahmat Suleimani, whose names were on the list previously given to the police. They wanted to kidnap him, but the young man managed to twist away and escape. He filed a report about the attack and tried to contact Banaz, but couldn't get through. On January 25, 2006, Rahmat couldn't stand it and reported Banaz's disappearance to the police. But since the young man was not a relative of the missing person, the officers didn't take his words seriously. The patrolman came to Mahmod's family home and asked where his daughter Banaz was. The father stated that his daughter was 20 years old. She was a free woman and could be anywhere, for example, with her friends. The head of the family mentioned that Banaz might not even come home to sleep, and that was normal for her. The police were satisfied with that answer. Moreover, neither the father nor the mother showed any concern. It could have ended there, if Rahmat had backed off. He went to the police station day after day and tried to convince the officers that Banaz would never disappear without warning him. He reminded them of the girl's previous requests for help. His persistence somehow made the authorities stir. It was lucky that a woman who had recently taken the position of department head became interested in the case. She was probably the first law enforcement officer to treat this case with the full rigor of the law. Caroline Good had only recently headed the Scotland Yard Department for investigating serious crimes. She received information about a missing girl who had reported being in danger back in October. Operatives were immediately sent to clarify the circumstances of the disappearance. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of people who knew what really happened to Banaz. But not a single member of the Kurdish community helped in her search. They deliberately tried to confuse justice, saying they had seen the girl alive in one place or another. The detectives had to face quite broad scales of a general conspiracy. More than 50 people were involved in this crime to one degree or another. The police had to do a lot of work to finally see a clearer picture of what was happening. A couple of days after the investigation began, they learned that Banaz had an older sister named Bekal, who didn't live in the family home. They managed to find the girl despite all her attempts to hide. When police officers knocked on Bekal's door and said they were looking for her sister, the girl immediately understood. Something terrible had happened to Banaz. She didn't believe that her relatives knew nothing about her sister's whereabouts. Deep down, she felt that they were the ones who had a hand in her disappearance. Bekal agreed to help the investigation. However, this soon became known to the men of the Mahmod family. In early March, someone from the Kurdish community found out Bekal's phone number. They called her to say that she would be next to follow Banaz. Considering that the men of the clan were somehow involved in the younger sister's disappearance, the risk for Bekal was catastrophic. The relatives had already found out her phone number, knew approximately in which area she had settled, and could show up at any moment. To be continued? This time, the police didn't wait for another person to disappear. They threw all their forces to ensure Bekal's safety. They moved her from house to house to prevent relatives from picking up the girl's trail, and it worked. The investigators directed all resources to this case, but the key to solving Banaz Mahmod's disappearance was already in their hands. Banaz herself left it. It was the letter she brought to the police station in early December of the previous year. There, under numbers 1 to 5, were the names of relatives ready to commit a crime and get rid of the girl. These names were mentioned by Uncle Ari Aga himself when talking on the phone with Banaz's mother. Initially, he planned to eliminate not only his niece, but also her boyfriend, but apparently something went wrong. Thanks to this letter, the police were able to subsequently identify some of the people the girl talked about. The letter turned out to be accurate. The descriptions of the people matched in all details. The Serious Crimes Department hoped to the last to find the girl alive. The missing girl's parents and Uncle Ari Aga were questioned, and searches were conducted in their homes. All of them refused to cooperate. In addition, the detectives encountered attempts by other members of the Kurdish community to hinder the investigation and protect those involved in the crime. During the interrogation, the detectives identified inconsistencies in what Banaz's father said initially. The analysis of Rahmat Suleimani's phone records also helped, where Banaz Mahmod appeared in a completely different light. He was never the indulgent parent he tried to portray himself as in the first meeting with the police. And checking Banaz's previous appeals to the station for help allowed the detectives to compile a list of persons of interest. Omar Hussein, Mohammed Marid Ali, and Mohammed Hama were Banaz's cousins. The initial task of the investigation was to find these three. As a result, only one, Mohammed Hama, was arrested. On February 4, 2006, he was charged with the murder of his sister. An important role in this decision was played by the fact that Suleimani identified Hama as one of those who had previously tried to kidnap him. But the suspect could be held in custody only for a certain time, as there were no convincing evidence against him at the moment. And that's when the race against time began. It was necessary to find Banaz, alive or dead. Otherwise, Mohammed would have to be released, and then the chances of punishing the guilty would be significantly reduced. While in custody, Hama boasted to other inmates that he and his brothers had dealt with Banaz, after which they got rid of her body. Hama didn't know that the conversation was being recorded by the police. Simultaneously with his arrest, raids were conducted across the country, but there were no signs of Banaz's presence. Her phone had not been active since the evening of January 23rd, and her bank account remained untouched. The Mahmod family showed no interest in the investigation. They didn't call the detectives and didn't ask if their daughter had been found. Even when the bottom of a small lake near their house was searched, no one came out on the street and showed no concern. A young girl disappeared, but absolutely no one from her close people cared about her fate. Usually the police investigate crimes in the interests of the victim's family. However, they searched for Banaz not for the sake of her parents, who didn't care about the girl. The story of a completely innocent victim touched the hearts of the department's employees, but couldn't melt the ice in the souls of her relatives. They wanted to find Banaz for her own sake, as she had no close people left in her family. Mohammed Hama's words that Banaz was no longer alive made the police search for her remains. They tracked the cousins' locations by their mobile phones and noticed that on the way to London, one of the brothers' cars remained stationary for some time on the outskirts of Birmingham. From the GPS navigator records in one of the brothers' cars, the detectives managed to establish the approximate place where they stopped. And from the recording of Mohammed Hama's conversation in the cell with other arrestees, the police knew that an old freezer should be somewhere there. The police immediately sent a helicopter to circle over the area where the brothers' cars were parked, and down on the ground, the investigators saw an old overgrown garden, a pile of garbage, and something resembling a freezer lying in the backyard of an abandoned house in the suburbs of Birmingham. As soon as the coordinates were transmitted to the police station, the detectives went there by car, despite the fact that night had fallen. They took a forensic archaeologist with them, who examined the ground in the garden behind the house and immediately noted that in the back part of the yard there was a disturbance in the soil cover. On April 28, 2006, the detectives found Banaz Mahmod's body, buried at a depth of about 2 meters. She lay in a suitcase, curled up in a fetal position. From this picture, even the police had tears in their eyes. An innocent creature that those she turned to for help couldn't save. Like a child in the mother's womb, the girl rested inside her improvised coffin. Banaz's tragedy was that her relationship with her parents went wrong from the beginning. Whether religion is to blame or traditions where imaginary honor is more valuable than the life of one's own child, it was pointless to argue. The life of a young blooming girl was cut short suddenly and without any remorse, judging by how the perpetrators behaved. And these were not serial maniacs. These people were the closest, those who should have protected and cherished this young soul in every way. When the dead body in the suitcase was buried in the garden of the abandoned house, the sewer burst and sewage flooded the pit. It turned out that even after death, this girl was simply thrown into a dirty puddle and buried. A police officer came to Banaz Mahmod and told her everything that happened to her sister. The girl couldn't control herself because she understood that even if her relatives had managed to track her down, a similar fate would await her. When the tears dried, she unhesitatingly agreed to testify against her family, and this greatly helped the prosecution team. Rahmat Suleimani also testified against the Mahmod family. 3 men were accused in Banaz's death, including her father and uncle, and 2 more suspects, Omar Hussein and Mohammed Marid Ali, managed to hide and flee to Iraq. All these people were proud of their masculinity. After all, they had done a great deed. They managed to defeat one young girl who didn't even defend herself. The investigators found out that Banaz met her death on the morning of January 24th. The suspects met at one of the cousins' places and then headed to the Mahmod residence. The parents deliberately left the family home to take their youngest daughter to school and go shopping, leaving Banaz sleeping in the living room. Along with her, one of the cousins remained in the house on the second floor, and no one else was there. This meant the path was clear for the men. Banaz had a habit of sleeping on the floor in the living room, as there wasn't even a separate bedroom for her in the house. The three men entered the house unhindered. When the girl opened her eyes, she already knew they had come to take her life. Mohammed Hama's story, recorded in the cell, allowed the horrific picture to be reconstructed in full. The man openly boasted about what he and his brothers had done that morning. He laughed when he said that they took turns strangling Banaz, but her soul didn't want to leave the body. Then they wrapped a rope around Banaz's neck and, pressing their feet against her chest, began to pull. The cord had already dug under the skin, but the girl's heart didn't want to stop. Then another man began kicking her in the head to finish what they started sooner and release the soul, thereby restoring the honor of the Mahmod clan. The attempts to end the family's shame took about 5 minutes. At the same time, Banaz didn't make a sound. Banaz's uncle Ari Aga and her father Mahmod were sentenced to life imprisonment for organizing the murder of the girl. Mohammed Hama pleaded guilty and also received a life sentence. By 2007, 3 men were behind bars, but the work was not completed. 2 of Banaz's cousins, suspected of her murder, fled to Iraq. None of them were extradited to the United Kingdom. However, Caroline Good's team was not going to give up. Banaz's death penetrated so deeply into the heart of the head of the Serious Crimes Department that she set herself a personal goal: to punish the guilty, even if it meant going to another country. By that time, Banaz Mahmod had become part of Caroline. It was her first case as head, and she wasn't going to let anyone get away with the death of an innocent victim. Omar Hussein and Mohammed Marid Ali fled from Europe, even before the police found the missing girl's body. In their homeland, they boasted that they had settled scores with Banaz and thought they had gotten off easy. Omar Hussein in Iraq was practically untouchable because his family was very influential. He lived with his brother, a high-ranking police officer. Many people in their homeland believed that the brothers had done nothing wrong. If Banaz had brought shame to her family, she should have died. One day, Omar Hussein quarreled with one of his brothers, and he shot him in the leg with a machine gun. As soon as the man ended up in the hospital, he was immediately arrested. The second suspect, Mohammed Marid Ali, got into a car accident. He hit a teenager and tried to flee. He was arrested by the local police. Caroline Good's team went to Iraq to secure the extradition of these 2 men from there. The whole process took 3 years, but in the end, they succeeded. Caroline Good fulfilled the promise she made to herself. Both Mohammed Marid Ali and Omar Hussein were also sentenced to life imprisonment. In the last 4 months of her life, Banaz Mahmod went to the police at least 5 times. After her death, an independent commission for reviewing complaints about police work began investigating misconduct. The commission criticized the behavior of 9 police officers, 6 from the Metropolitan Police and 3 from West Midlands, for not making enough effort to help the girl. The Banaz Mahmod case taught the police a lot. Effective mechanisms were developed to ensure efficient and professional investigation standards. Special public safety departments appeared in all London districts. Training is also conducted to raise awareness on honor-based violence issues. The police are determined to ensure the safety of potential victims to prevent a repeat of Banaz's story. Many claim that the topic of honor crimes should not be touched upon due to the fear of stigmatizing entire communities. But it's not about religion or the traditions of individual peoples at all. This has been happening for centuries in different cultures and religions around the world. The Mahmod family had never commented on this case before, but one day they contacted reporters to say that Banaz was a sweet, caring, smart, and kind girl who loved her family, and the family loved her too. They still miss her. When Banaz left her husband, her relatives did everything to support her. The relatives of the deceased girl claim that they never oppressed their daughters and even now take care of her grave. The Mahmod family blames the police for everything, which failed to protect its citizens. Officer Caroline Good visits Banaz's grave from time to time. However, she is not sure that many others do it. The burial remained nameless for several years after the trial. The female police officer, on her own initiative, took on the role of a mother who preserves the memory of her deceased daughter. She didn't feel that the girl was loved by her own parents during her lifetime, so let Banaz at least know after death that someone remembers her. Caroline Good still communicates with Bekhal. The eldest Mahmod daughter has never taken off her paranja, as she still fears for her safety. Rahmat Suleimani tried with all his might to adapt to a new life. According to the Witness Protection Program, he lived very secluded and isolated. The man never recovered after his fiancée's death. In May 2016, 10 years after her death, the man took his own life. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.